We're now on Daf Tzadi Beis. We're beginning the 11th parak, which is called Dam Chatos. And as introduction to this parak, we have to read a bunch of psukim in Vayikra Vav. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, daber el Aaron ve'el banov lemor, zos Toras Chatos. So we have to emphasize and underline the word Chatos, because the implication might be that this is a separate halach in Chatos, and that's the opening line, the opening two words in the Mishnah, Dam Chatos. And then it says, B'makom asher tishochet ha'olah tishochet hachatos. The shchita of a korban chatos has to be bitzafon, in the northern part of the Azorah, just like an olah. L'fnei Hashem kodesh kadoshim hu, and the chatos is kodesh kadoshim. And then it says, HaKohen HaMachate Osa Yochlena B'Makom Kadosh Te'ochel B'Chatzar Ol Moed V'Kol Asher Yiga B'Bsora Yikdash V'Asher Yazem Midoma Ala Beged. Oh, this is the punchline of the whole discussion. Kol Asher Yiga B'Bsora Yikdash. Okay, we'll leave that out for now. That's not for us. But then it says, Vasher Yize Midoma Al HaBeged, if some of the Dam Chatos gets sprinkled on a garment, is then it says, Asher Yize Oleo Techabes B'Mokom Kadosh. Now, let's emphasize a few things here. Number one, it says, Asher Tishochet. And we're describing a chatos that requires shchita. We know of a chatos that doesn't have shchita, and that's called a chatos ha'of. And the question is, if dam from the chatos ha'of gets sprinkled on a person's garment, does this obligation of techabes apply? That you have to launder the cloth? And that's going to be a subject of machlokas in the Gemara. The Gemara is assuming, until Rav Yosef comes along, that there's no din of dam kibus other than in chatas behema, because it says tishachet, only that which is subject to shchita, as opposed to malika and oath. But Rav Yosef is going to say something different. So the Mishnah says dam chatas shenitas. Nitas means it was splattered onto his beged, harezet ton kibus, right? The Torah says techabes. Now notice that this pasuk is talking about specifically a chatos chitzona on the mizbeach hachitzon, because it says in the pasuk hakohen machatos so yachlena. Yochlena is only a chatos hachitzona, but not a chatos pnimis. So the Mishnah says no. This halacha of kibus applies even in the case of a chatos pnimis. Shenemar b'makom kadosh te'ochel echad nacholos v'echad pnimios te'unos kibus. So we derive from a pasuk of b'makom kadosh that even in the case of a chatos pnimis, you still require kibus to launder the beged if some of the dam of the chatos gets sprinkled, smattered onto the beged. Now, where do we see this in the pasuk? Shenemar, even though it says in the pasuk Yochlena, which implies that it's limited to chatos ha-chitzonu, but nevertheless it says Toras chatos. Toras ha-chatos means Torah achas tiel l'kol ha-chatos, that all the chatos come under this halach. Now, if all the chatos, the Torah is being marba, come under this requirement of kibus, then it should apply even to oaf, because that's a chatos as well. That's going to be the subject of our discussion. The Mishnah continues, chatos psula ein domaton kibus. We're going to derive from a special pasuk, and the Alfus is going to establish that if the chatos became pasul, then the dam no longer has the status of dam chatos, and therefore it gets sprinkled. You don't have to clean it off. Now, what's the chiddush of that? That seems very simple and straightforward, but if you read the next part of the Mishnah, you'll see the Chiddush. Bein shahoisa lo shasa kosher, bein shalo hoisa lo shasa kosher. The Chiddush is that this requirement does not apply even in a case where it had a shasa kosher, where the chatos had in some point in time kashrus. Ezi shahoisa lo shasa kosher. What psulim does the Mishnah have in mind to exclude, to exclude the requirement of kibbutz, and it had a shasa kosher? That's number one, shalano. Lino means it was left overnight. Two, shahaisala, just 1 second, where did I skip? Vishenitma, or it became tameh. And number three, shayatzas, it went out of the azor. That's a psul of yotzei. And in all these cases, even though it had a shasa kosher, but now it's possible, it became possible. We did lino, we did tuma, we did yotze, and therefore there's no longer a requirement of kibbutz. Ezi shalo haisa shasa kosher, nishcheta chutzim zman chutzim koma. Already at the time of the shechita, he had the machshava poselis of chutzim zman chutzim koma. Shekivu psulim es domo. We said that Kabbalas Hadam is one of the four major avodos, has to be done by a Kohen. If it was done by an apostle, then the dam is possible, and there's no din of kibbutz. The Gemara says, dam chatos shenitas, right? If you have the smattering of the blood of a chatos, if it's a chatos hanecheles, that's straightforward in the Torah, then you have to launder the beg. So the Gemara asks, "V'eat Torah achas l'chol chatos." But wait a second, you're telling me that this only applies after shechita, which means only in an animal, not in a bird, which is subject to malika. Then afilu chatos ofnami, but you have Torah achas l'chol chatos. So why don't we include chatos of in Torah achas l'chol chatos? Salom ataydi. Why do we have it a brayso yochel tehei? I might think that dam chatos of ton kibbutz Talmud lomer zos. So we have an exclusion from the word zos, and zos is going to tell me that a bird chatos does not require kibbutz if the dam is splattered. But the Gemara says you have a problem here because you just finished deriving from the pasuk of Torah achas l'chol chatos that all the chatos are included. Omer shlokish mishum bar kapora omar kro tishachet. We have another mute in addition to the mute of zos. So zos is sort of like a gilui that we take the word tishachet literally to exclude oaf, which doesn't have shchita, it has only malika. The Torah is only talking about an animal that has to be slaughtered, as opposed to a bird that is killed through malika. Maybe when the Torah says that the dam chatas oaf requires kibbutz, maybe it's only talking about necholos, and it would not apply to a chatas hapnimis. The pasuk is outspoken about the fact that it's a chatas that's eaten. Now we go back to the ribui that Torah achas yelachem. So why don't we include the bird? We have the miyud of zos. Umara isa. Why do you prefer to take the word zos to exclude a dam, the dam of a chatas ha'of, and you take the Torah achas to include a chatos pnimis? Why not do it the other way around? Why not say that zos chatos, Torah chatos l'chol chatos is coming to include chatos ha'of, and the miyud of zos is coming to exclude chatos pnimios? Mara isa. Why do you see fit to do it this way? And where it says mistaber, it's more logical. The chatos behema pnimis havi leila rebuya. It makes more sense that you would include The chatos of a behema, since we have this inclusion, this ribui of Torah achasiyah l'chol chatos, because fundamentally it's very similar to a chatos hachitzona. Shekain behema and shchitas tzofon v'kabolas kli. We have three different halachos which are common to both chatas pnimis and chatas chitzoni. Number one, it's all behema requires shchita. Number two, the shchita has to be b'tzofon. And number three, you need kabbalas dam. The dam has to be received in a vessel. Now we turn to Tzadi Beis, Amid Beis, the Keren, and a fourth element that's similar to all chatos of behema is Keren, right? Which means that the Kohen has to put his finger into the dam and apply that dam onto the mizbeach on the kronos v'etzba v'chuda, and it has to be applied to the very edge of the keren v'ishim, and then it's got haktar seimurim. You have to burn the sacrificial parts, as he calls it here, onto the mizbeach. So let's count up. How many do we have here? We have four, no, maybe five. We have behema, shchita, sofon, kabbalas kli. That's three. Keren is four. Chuda is five. Etzba is six, and Ishim is seven. Seven common denominators to the two chatos of behema. Fact the Gemara, but there are some common denominators to chatas ha'of and chatas behema. Adrabah. Let's go the other way around. Chatas ha'of havi leila rebuye. Let's include chatas ha'of in the law of kibbutz. Why? Shkein chutz kamosa. Right, it's done in the Azara, as opposed to chatas primis, which is done in the Heichal. V'achila kamosa, and parts of the chatas ha'of are eaten by the Kohen, which is not true in the case of chatas primis. So we're into hanach nefishin. Here we have more. What was the number we had? 6? I forgot. 6 versus 2. Okay, then I think we'll stop here. We're slowly catching up. And I wish you a good day.